That's super cool, Adina. I don't know how to do that. Are you all set, Adina? Okay.
Okay, awesome. So we are going to get started. Can you guys hear me okay? Good? Okay. So we're going to get started. I want to thank Rebecca. We are very, very excited to all learn from you and bake with you. I can say I absolutely love your baking, so much so that I enlisted Rebecca to help make birthday cakes for my daughter Ella this past July, because you know, much harder to get birthday cakes and things like that in the way that you would normally do it. And everything she makes is fantastic. So we're very excited to learn how to make this apple crown challah with you. And I also want to thank Jen, who is our new Chevra coordinator. She is fantastic, and she's organized all of this along with our other Ella programming. So we're super, super grateful to her. And this is our real kickoff Chevra event. So thank you guys for being with us, and thank you to Jen. And of course, as always, thank you to Adina for all of her behind the scenes work and making things happen smoothly. So we're just going to start out with a little bit of background on Hafreshat Challah, which is the separating out of the challah itself, as well as sort of a kavanah and intention to lead us into some really fun and chill baking together. So as you might be familiar with, and as Jenny actually mentioned just a moment ago, there is a mitzvah in the Torah, in Bamidbar, where we see this commandment to give Hashem, once we're eating of the bread of the land, truma l'Hashem, a gift to God. And it's very specific in how much we end up giving halachically from bread, which is what Jenny was referring to, and I'll explain in a moment. But one of the psukim related to it says, Mereshit arisotechem tinu l'Hashem truma l'dorotechem. From the first of your dough, meaning like really from the best of it, you shall give a gift to Hashem in all your generations. This first produce that's coming out, just like Bikurim, it's a piece that we're giving to God, and it's something that's a statute that lasts for all time. So that the actual challah itself, we refer to challah as the bread that we have on the table on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, but challah is actually this piece that we remove from the dough itself and give it over to God as a gift. When the temple was standing, that meant giving it to the Kohanim as part of the service. But without the temple standing in our days, what we do is anytime we make challah and the dough is a certain size, we take out an amount called challah. So that's actually what challah means, is that amount we remove, and we burn it in the oven. So this is practically, we're gonna do it at the time that it will come in the process of our baking with Rebecca. So we will remove what's like essentially a shot glass amount of dough from our challah, from our bread, whatever our dough itself that we've made, pre-made or in the process of making. And then we'll put it on foil in our oven on broil. And that should be in the oven on its own. It's something that we do in the process of making our challah. So there's, I think, a really beautiful teaching that comes from the Midrash about how Adam Harishon, the first person created, is described as having been kneaded like dough from the earth, meaning like the ground itself. Adam is called Adam, meaning Adamah, from the earth, and that God then placed a soul inside of this kneaded dough. And the Midrash describes Adam as chalato shel olam, that a person is the challah of the world. Humans are called to sanctify ourselves and the world around us, just like the challah itself is sanctified in service of God. It's something that's separated out. And what I love about this image, especially right now, is we know what it is to be separated out, not only in terms of Kedusha and holiness, separating out the day of Shabbos, separating out, doing things a little bit different, but we also know what it is to experience distance and separation. And challah is a reminder in and of itself that sometimes separation and distance can be an act of serving God. It can be a holy thing. And so what I want us to do in the back of our minds as we're having fun together and chilling and learning from Rebecca is to use this as an opportunity to reflect on how we can become chalato shel olam, to be the challah of the world. And that means, whether it's before we enjoy this challah on Rosh Hashanah, or if we're going to enjoy it before Rosh Hashanah, whatever your preference is, if you're going to freeze the dough or freeze the challah, that we make an intention in our hearts, maybe it's one or two things that we can do to use separation as a pathway to sanctity, as a pathway to holiness and service of God. Challah is something that's separated out in the way of making service to Hashem holier, more full, a sense of gratitude. So let's keep that in our minds, that the service we're doing right now is a process of serving God. I'll just give you a practical note. So generally when you're making challah, you have the dough, the amount needs to be at least 59 ounces of flour in the recipe in order for you to make the bracha of challah. If it's between 43 ounces and 59 ounces, you take challah without a bracha. If it's less than 53 ounces of flour in your recipe, then you don't take challah. Our recipe is for 4.5 cups, which is 36 ounces, which is less than the amount required to even take challah without a bracha. So I doubled the recipe. Some of you might have done the same. So when we get to that point, I'm going to take that dough. I will make the bracha on the amount that I have that's greater than 59 ounces of flour, and I will put it in the oven and burn it. When you say amen to my bracha, it is as if you are fulfilling it too. Amen is not just a word we say, it actually has the halachic effect of you fulfilling that mitzvah too. The last thing that I want to say is that when I was in Israel learning, one of my friends, Megan Balatin, gave me this Hafreshet Challah bracha book, which some people may have too. It's like, really just the bracha itself. But it has this additional kavanah that's not included in all sidurim. And I wanted to share just one line from it. And that's what I'll end with before we actually get to the fun stuff. And it's this very last line in here says, Ukshem shani mekayemet mitzvah hafreshet challah beratzon v'simcha. Just as I am fulfilling the mitzvah of separating out the challah with my own will and passion and with joy, because we want to have joy in this process, Ken yishmereni hakel mikol tzarot v'yisurim. So too may God protect me from all sadness and all suffering. So I want to also give us that prayer that what we are doing and hanging out together and learning and just enjoying and making challah is also an opportunity for us to pray that there is less suffering and sadness in the world, that God protects all of us, and that we all feel joy in our hearts in serving God. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, and she'll come back to me just to make the bracha at the point of Hafreshet Challah. But thank you guys so much for being here. This is super fun, and I'm really excited.
Thank you. Rebecca, before you start, just one thing. If you guys take any photos tonight, please send them to me. I'll put my number in the chat, also my email. Take photos when your challah is done, or if you're baking with your kids or your family or yourself. We'd love to have those.
Perfect. Thank you, Alyssa.
Sorry, Rebecca, let me just add one thing to what you said. Because one time I asked for pictures and I got pictures of food, which was lovely, but I would love pictures of people and food together.
Perfect. Okay. If you can hear my baby in the background, I'm sorry. It's bath time. I realized as Alyssa was speaking, I needed to proof my yeast. So I did like a few steps ahead, but I will go over them. So what I'm going to do as we go is I'm going to go through every step basically. And if you have a question and you want to type it in the chat is probably the best way. And then if Jennifer and Adina can just let me know or jump in, that's great, because then I can keep going. And I'll do my best to show you everything I'm doing as I'm doing it. So we're going to start with our yeast, and I'm sure everyone has made challah before, but I'm going to go over every step just in case. So the first thing you do with the yeast is you want to proof it. And this is it's hard because it's at the bottom of the bowl. But you want to see that it's showing up and it's starting to puff up. I just did it right now, so it's not really super puffy, but I took it from yeast that I always use, so I have faith that it's going to continue and do its thing. So we start in the recipe with 1.25 cups of water, and you want that to be the warmest water from your tap. So I just turn my tap on, I let it run, I keep my hand under it until I start to feel like it's getting warm, and then I put the water in. Then you can sprinkle the 2.5 teaspoons of yeast over the water. So I'm gonna slow down so I make sure everyone has I know most people, well, wait, actually, let me remember. Most people have their challah already done, right? Yeah, okay, so I'm not gonna slow down so much. Sorry, Daria. But if you need me to slow down, you can tell me. You can just jump on and tell me. Okay, so you do your water, then your yeast and your sugar. Our sugar you can put in now. You can put in all 6 tablespoons now. What the sugar does is it's really going to work well with the yeast. Whenever I was like making challah with preschoolers, I always tell them that the sugar and the yeast are friends, and the yeast and the salt are not friends. So that's why we put in the salt later. So, so go ahead and do your water, your yeast, and your sugar. And then once it's proofed, or you have good faith that it's going to work out because you know your yeast, you can go ahead with the rest of the recipe. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to just get myself set up a little more here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. All right. So I've got my yeast here. Now I'm going to put in a 1/4 cup of oil. Okay. So I've got a 1/4 cup of oil. I'm going to throw that in. This is like what I love about this recipe is it's really easy. I often, although this is not something you would normally do with baking, I often just throw it in and kind of eyeball it, which is kind of like baking blasphemy, but it's really pretty forgiving. So then I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to start mixing it around. I realized I don't have sorry, I'm a little flustered. My baby is crying a lot and he's with his father and he's fine, but it's like flustering me. So we're going to go ahead and put in our 4. I usually do, honestly, because I'm really comfortable with this recipe and I use it every week, I'm going to put in about 3 cups of flour in the 4 to 4.5. Like I'm going to do 3 of those now. And I'm going to start mixing. Once I put the flour in, I'm going to start mixing. So we've now gone all the way down to the flour in the recipe. And then that's when we throw the salt in. And we put the salt in after the flour because that salt really starts to agitate the yeast. So you want to put it in after the flour's gone in. And my salt's right here. So you're going to put in 2 teaspoons. I put in a generous amount of salt because it always makes it taste better. And then this is where you really want to watch and I'll fold it so you can see it better. You really want to watch how it's pulling it together. I've learned by using this recipe week after week that when it's, sorry guys, I'm working on it. There we go. When it stays a little bit wetter, it's like wetter than I'd like because it's wetter than I'd like to be working with. It comes out better in the end. So this still could use, I put in 3 cups of flour, so this could still use at this point another cup or so. But you can see it's pretty dry. So I'm probably just going to put in about another 1/2 cup of flour. I'm seeing some questions. I usually let the yeast proof 10-15 minutes. I usually do it and I walk away and then I remember I did it and I come back later. Very casual about it. What would change if we wanted to add egg? I don't know. I'm not enough of a food scientist to know what would change. You would have to compare an egg recipe and a water challah recipe. There might be some significant changes, probably in the oil. I'm just making sure I got everybody's questions. Yeah, okay. So now that's mixing together, it's getting a little, okay, that would come together really well. What it's doing is it's starting to, you can see that those pieces that are kind of raggedy, they're like coming together. And that will all combine into one challah, not challah, now that I've learned that, one dough without needing more water to add to it. So we're gonna stop there so you don't have to just listen to my mixer and kind of pretend that we got to the point where it all comes together. I like to.
Rabanita, Alyssa, there looks like there's a question for you.
Great. Go for it, Alyssa.
Okay. Yeah, there is a, oh, sorry, hold on. Practice that some have of putting soap on it and throwing it away. The general practice is to burn it in the oven though, because it has more of the like the sacrificial quality to it. If you imagine it sort of being burned on the altar, and it's also become something that you totally wouldn't eat. So that's the thinking with the soap, is once you put the soap on it, no one's usually going to eat that. But the sort of standard practice is to still put it in the oven if you're willing to burn it.
Cool. Okay. So now my challah, actually, as soon as I mixed that or just kneaded it myself on the counter, it totally came together really nicely. So that ended up being 4 cups of flour. And I always try to make sure that my dough gets kneaded on slow if it's in the machine, if it's on the mixer, or if it's by hand, really for 10 minutes. Like 10 minutes of kneading is kind of the magic number. I heard that once and it's always been accurate. Okay, so now we're going to pretend that we skipped forward in time, like a cooking show. And what you would do at this point with your dough is you would cover it and you would let it rise until you, for about, I like to let it rise for about 2 hours. And then it's, you know, it's coming over your bowl, much like Alyssa's looks like right now. And that's where you would punch it down. So we're gonna go over to Alyssa and she's gonna take the challah from the dough.
Okay, so you see I have my challah, and it was originally 2 different batches. When you're doing this at home, you want to combine all of it together. You can cover it, whatever your practice is, but you want to have it all together as one. And instead of in separate loaves, you put it together and you say the bracha first, and then you remove the challah. So I'm going to say the bracha, say amen, and have in your mind that you're fulfilling it with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahafrish challah. So I'm going to take out like approximately a shot glass amount, and I'm going to recognize that this is challah, and I'm going to put it in muff oil, and I'm going to put it in the oven that's heated to broil already. I'm just going to add that kavanah one more time so that you can have it in your mind for ourselves and for all of the world. וכשם שאני מקיימת מצוות הפרש חלה ברצון ובשמחה, כן ישמרני האל מכל צרות וייסורים.
Thank you.
Okay, so now, thank you, Alyssa. we're going to, I've got my dough that I actually made on Friday and froze it, and I'm letting it's defrosted and come back to room temperature, and we're gonna braid this. But before we braid it, I'm gonna make the filling for it. So I've got, you can make, I gave you some suggestions with the filling, but I want you to feel free to be creative as you'd like. I've got some honey, I've got some apples. I also normally would put in some cinnamon and some raisins. And I'm just gonna quickly show you that process as soon as I find my favorite knife. Or I'm not gonna find my favorite knife and I'm just gonna do it. I saw your question about time for freezing ahead of time and refrigerating. I froze this on Friday. I think you could probably keep it in your freezer. I'm not a regular challah freezer person, so I don't have an exact answer. It's probably better answered by Google, honestly. I can tell you that I defrosted it at about 3 this afternoon. It's now just starting, like this is just starting to really kind of come back to life. Was it 3? No, it was 3:30 when I got home. So it's been 4 hours. It probably needed 6 hours to be like totally perfect. But that's what my day was today. So I would try to give it 6 hours in defrosting and coming back up to room temperature, because it would be preferable that it would be, you know, you would kind of put it right back into that same spot where you do if you were making it fresh, that it's defrosted completely, it's come back up to room temperature, and it's starting to expand again. And I saw another question. Oh yeah, same question, how to freeze it. I just threw it in a Ziploc freezer bag and I put it in my freezer. I do it after the point where I punch it down. So if this were to get a towel over it and rise for 2 hours, I would punch it down and then I would throw it in that Ziploc bag, like a freezer Ziploc bag, and throw it in the freezer. So I would chop up my apple super fine. I've done it bigger different years and it's kind of just gotten in the way. So we want to make it pretty small. This is about the size of 1 apple. Depending on how much challah you're making, you might want to do 2 apples. You might want to do 3 apples. I'll show you what 1 apple fills as we go, and that might give you also an idea. And then I'm going to mix some honey in. This is actually, and we're really proud of this honey. This is from our bees that we had nearby in the neighborhood. So this is like the most local honey you can get. If you have a cold, come on over, have some honey. Okay, and then you would just mix it around. Because this is like super local fancy honey, it's not mixing as well as maybe like a store-bought honey would be, where it would just be super gooey and work with you and mix very nicely and easily without getting all clumped up and falling out of my bowl. But yes, you get the gist. Just kind of mix it around. And then I often like to mix in some raisins. Those are not raisins, here are raisins. And some cinnamon. Raisins are great because they're dehydrated, so you're not adding a lot of moisture. One of the things you want to be careful about is adding too much moisture to your challah, because you could throw out the kind of like water, fat, and flour ratio. And then I like to add a little cinnamon, but I hope it is obvious that this is always kind of like a what I feel like at the moment process, that you could, if you love cardamom, throw it in. Cloves would be great. Nutmeg would be great. Allspice would be great. So I would just mix it up. It's a little bit, you know, I was thinking it's a little bit like haroset. You could make a haroset recipe, but you want it to have less liquid. You want it to be really, really dry. Okay, so now I've got this. I'm going to put it aside and I'm going to start my braiding. So I did a few different braids in planning for this and wanting to be prepared for tonight. And the one that I think really was the nicest overall, we're going to do now, which is, actually, let me show you really quickly. I'll share. Susan, your apples have been sitting for a while and they're very liquidy. I would just drain out the liquid. Just like, you know, keep the apples to one side and let the liquid go out. If you want to have these for Rosh Hashanah, I would freeze the dough. Yes, the dough should rise before you put it in the freezer. Don't worry about the skin. You can leave it on or off. It's no big deal. If you want to use the challah for Rosh Hashanah, I would not braid it right now. I would freeze it. Watch how we braid it. Maybe practice. But I would, unless you have a lot of freezer space, you could, if you have a lot of freezer space, you could braid it and put it in your freezer. I do not have that kind of freezer space. So I would freeze my dough and then braid it right before I want to bake it. Okay, I'm going to keep going. If I miss anybody's question, someone can shout at me. Okay, where you guys are all so busy. I love it. Okay. Oh, right. I'm sorry, I forgot what I was doing. I stopped to read those questions and I forgot. So I'm going to just share with you my picture of the challahs that I made so you kind of know where we're going to go. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's do this. Okay. So, sorry. That's my baby. Okay. So this is the challah we're going to do. You're going to need for it, it's coming. I forgot how slow this can be. You're going to need 3 strands across and 3 strands across this way. So 6 strands total. So if you want to start dividing your dough into 6 strands, you can. If you want to make, you can definitely, I'm going to show you all the ones I made from this, like from about 1 recipe's worth, was I made this one, which we're going to make. I made this one, and I made 2 little ones right here. So you could definitely make at least 2 big ones. And you would want 6 strands for each. So I'm going to help you in a second. And then this is where it was when I first braided it and then started to let it rise. And while we're at it, I'm going to help my husband with something really quick. That's what it looked like after 2 hours. I'll be right back. I'll show you the next picture while my child screams. This is what it looked like when it was done rising and I was going to throw it in the oven.
Hi guys, I'm stepping in for Michal, who had to go to get the baby. What are we supposed to be doing now? Oh, hi.
Hi. Okay, we are making 6 strands of challah dough for 1 challah. So if you were trying to make 2 challahs, you want to make 12.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. You're just going to need 6 strands for 1 challah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start making that. I'm going to turn my screen so you can see what I'm doing. So because this is a whole recipe, I'm going to first divide it in half. And then from this, I'm gonna cut it in half again. And then I'm gonna cut 1/2 into 3 parts. And I'm gonna start rolling that out. I think I normally do bedtime routine, and my husband is very kindly doing it tonight, so I can do this, but I think our child is rejecting it.
We're gonna freeze it for Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah,
I just divided it into half so I can make 2 different loaves and then
that's
just
perfect.
put it in freezer bags.
Yes.
And I did mine in the bread machine, the dough.
Mhm.
So this is already risen partly, right?
Right.
So I should just go ahead and put this in freezer bags and put it in the freezer and watch you. And so I know what to do next.
Yeah, to clarify, I don't use a bread machine. So has it risen since it's been in the machine?
Right. Yeah, well, it was rising for a chunk of time before it turned off.
How long was that chunk of time? About approximately.
It's certainly not an hour. It's
Okay, so
definitely
I'd
not.
give it another hour before you freeze it.
Okay.
If you want to just let it hang out.
And
Okay.
do we fill it as we braid it?
I'm gonna show you the whole thing. We're gonna fill it as we braid it, yes. Okay.
Rebecca, how did you get your dough so elastic? I'm seeing you and I'm seeing Revenite Alyssa do it next to you, and I can see there's like a difference there.
Dude, you're calling me out.
It's my fault. I'm really curious how Rebecca did it.
I was thinking the same thing, but like.
Are your hands moist, Rebecca? What are you doing?
I'll be honest, this is really moist. So it's probably, so the one we made together before is not as moist. I think this one just had a little bit more water content to it. What I found is that if you just kind of err on the side of wet as you go, it does help it really get elasticy. And what I learned by making my pies at BB's for a while was watching their bakers do their bread, right? They did the challah in the back where I would bake pies also. And so I got to really watch. I never learned to do this. Like I'd always roll it, but they do this. And it was like, it made a big difference. So I learned that from them. Okay.
Do that one more time. Do that one more time for those of us who are more challenged.
Sure. They go like this. They like would roll it out, right? They go like that. And then they would go like this. They would like wiggle it kind of like a pencil. Like when you do the pencil.
It works.
It does. It works really well. Okay. So I've got my 6 strands here. I'm going to put some to the side to show you how we fill it. And I would take a rolling pin. If you do not have a rolling pin handy, a wine bottle works really, really well. And you just want to flatten it out. And then my apples probably weren't cut with the best ratio in mind to this particular strand of challah. So they're not fitting in super great. I should have made them a little bit smaller. That is also a little bit of how I bake, because I'm like, oh, next time I know to do that, I'm not going to stop right now. So then what you want to do, especially if your dough is very elasticy, is just tuck them over like this. One thing I have found to be more successful over the years, because I do this usually every Rosh Hashanah, is you don't really want to fill every strand. When you do that, it tends to kind of like overload the whole dough and become very difficult to work with. So we probably really want to fill about 3 of the strands. So now I've got that one. It's a little bit, those innards were a little bit too big for it, to be really honest. And it now wants to fall apart.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So this is, how thin should these strands be?
You don't want them to be too thin, but it'd be better to have a smaller apple than a thinner dough, like strand of dough.
Okay.
Does that help?
Is this way too thick?
See? No, that's great. The thicker the better.
This is okay?
Yeah, it's really okay.
Okay.
Rebecca, you have another question. Do you put flour on the counter before rolling out?
I don't, because it tends to make it really, it's this really fine balance. Did I stop sharing my screen? Yes, okay. It's this really fine balance of keeping it wet enough that it's gonna all like this, like be really elasticy and come together super nicely. You know when you get your challah too dry and you braid it and then you cut into it after you've baked it and you can see like, oh, there's a chunk, there's a chunk, there's a chunk. That's too dry. So you really want it to stay wetter. So everything you do that absorbs moisture is taking it from being wetter to being drier. So we kind of, I don't personally put flour down. If you can't get it off your counter, feel free. But if you can go without it, try it. I'm noticing that this is like a little bit too thin to really hold my apples. So I'm making it a little bit shorter and wider. So I can now put these in. And then these are gonna fit in a little bit better and be happier. Okay, so I'm just pinching it over really gently. Sometimes I roll it all the way over. This has like a really nice seam. I'm keeping it wetter, which also when you oil your bowl, when you have your challah in here, it's gonna also help add to that moisture. Okay, so now I have 2 of these guys filled. I'm gonna do 1 more because it really helps to not fill all of them. So you don't have this like messy, honey, sticky, gooey challah mess. Although it's delicious, it can be quite messy at your table. Okay, there we go. So now I'm gonna fill this last little guy. What I love to do with this is sometimes, especially when I've had friends, like not worked at a Jewish place, but had friends there that were Jewish, is like make these before Rosh Hashanah and like make small ones and give them as gifts. And people love them. And you can, when you want to make a small one, I'll show you afterwards, you can just do the 1 strand roll up. But first we'll conquer this tricky braid situation. Okay, so I now have, just want to make sure everybody's with me. We're gonna go to the braiding. Can you give me like a thumbs up if you're ready?
We had one question.
Yeah.
Did you put oil on your hands to keep the dough moist? No.
No, you could do that. That's not a bad idea. I didn't. It was just, it was moist enough.
We could use a couple more minutes to keep putting in the filling.
Okay, great. Go for it.
I assume you don't use liquid in the apples mix.
Say it again, Hannah. I just didn't get your question.
I assume you don't use the liquid that's in the apples mix. You kind of drain it.
I would drain it. Yeah, you want to keep that liquid out of your challah because it's just gonna get really soggy. Because someone needed a few more minutes, I'm gonna show you a 1 strand one that you can do super easy. And these are always nice to have for your, like, to make sure you have enough challah for your meals.
Rebecca, can I ask you a question about keeping the apples?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Mine seem to be falling apart even after I, tucked everything in nicely. They're now opening. What's the secret to keeping them closed?
There isn't a great secret. So when you said that, I looked over at mine and it had opened and I just pinched it back. Once you braid it, you're gonna kind of like glue it together with the other strands. So just be patient with it until you braid it. If then you braid it and it keeps doing that in one spot, you can like take a little bit of challah and put it on top, like to kind of glue it back together. Okay, so I'm going to show a quick one strand guy that you might want in place of either to take to a meal, not that any of us are doing that, or to give as a gift. So often what I would do is you just roll out these one little strand. I would often roll it, fill it like I did with these guys with the apples and honey. And then you just roll it up like a little, I think of it as like a snail shell, like that drawing of like, woo. So you roll it up like that and you tuck it underneath. And it's so simple and it's really sweet. And you would let it rise just like that. And if it has the apples and honey in it, you can often see it, like it'll poke out a little bit and it'll come out just like this size and they're really nice. So it's something I would do if you have a few more strands. Any other questions or does anyone need any longer before we start the braiding?
I can ask one question. Jeremy,
Sure.
give me our dough. He added a little too much flour and it seems to be dry. Is there a way to remedy it?
I would try oil in the bowl. Like coat it in the bowl with oil and like turn it around. So as you're like this got too dry. By a little bit, not a lot, but it could be wetter. So I would just put in more oil.
Yeah, because this is like the consistency of like baked bread.
Yeah. So I would just put in a small amount. I probably drizzled in like about a tablespoon. And then you want to roll it around in the bowl, kind of like coating it in the oil. And then when that rises, that's really going to add to your moisture. It already feels dramatically better. Voila. Okay. All right. I'm going forward with the braiding unless there's any cries. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to start, you're going to do 3 lines this way and 3 strands over it. So I'm going to take 2 unfilled strands and put them here. So you're doing 3 and 3 perpendicular. So I have 1. So this isn't filled. This is just plain old challah. This is filled with the apples and the raisins. And then this is also empty. So it's like, we've got 3 this way. And now.
Sorry, could I ask a question? Remedial challah maker here. Were we not supposed to fill up all the strands?
It tends to kind of like get overwhelmed. So if you just do 3, that's great. But if you do all of them, it's not the end of the world.
Okay. Sorry. I've only done 1. I'm catching up.
Okay. It'll be messy, but it'll be delicious.
All right. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So I've got my 3 this way. And now I'm going to do my other 3 perpendicular. This way. Now this is kind of like when you're making a pie, you know, and that's something I do a lot. And you want to do like a lattice. So I'm going to pull the middle one up and I'm going to put this one, got a little thick right there, over 2 and pull this back down. So I'm going to show that one more time because sometimes this can really trip people up. And you can see I'm pinching, Dina, this keeps falling apart. Like I just keep pinching it back together. So I've got my middle strand and I pulled this strand over the 2 flat ones and I pulled this over my perpendicular strand. Okay, and then I'm gonna put, oh, I didn't balance that out right. Okay, sorry. I'm going to then pull these outer strands, these two outer strands. Sorry, you can't see because my hand. These two outer strands up. I'm gonna fold them over. And I'm gonna put this strand, this is filled here. And I'm gonna pull these outer strands back over. So you're making a lattice so that everyone is over, under, over, under.
Sorry, and only the middle one is stuffed, right?
The middle one on the bottom is stuffed, and then on the top, the two outer ones are stuffed.
Okay.
I will be honest, this is a disaster. This is totally falling apart. I'm gonna take my cute other little one and I'm going to try to remedy this situation. It's just too wet and too thin. It was the first one I filled and it just was too little. And I've done this enough to know it's not gonna end well. So I'm gonna just remedy this guy. I'm gonna fill him. He's gonna be so happy. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, so now back over here, I've got my outer strand, my middle strand, my outer strand. I'm gonna pull my two outer strands up and over. And I'm gonna put my filled strand up this way. Okay, I have sung so many praises about having wetter challah dough, but right now it's I'll be honest, it's an absolute mess. Okay, so now we've got this. You should have this like over under pattern so that it looks like a lattice. And we are going to braid it. This part, we're gonna braid each end. So I'm gonna braid this part like this. If you twist it a little bit as you go, that'll help it from falling out, which it desperately wants to do right now. And I'm gonna braid this end. Just your regular old 3 braid. I'm gonna braid this end. Sorry, I know that's not super helpful because my hands are in the way. Okay, and then I'm gonna braid this end. Okay. Now what we do, okay, this is, so like Adina asked, this is starting to come apart, this is coming apart. I'm gonna keep trying to pinch it, and if not, I'm gonna add a little bit of dough to the top. Or it'll bake open and it'll be super beautiful. Okay, so once you have your lattice and you have 4 braids on each side, you're gonna tuck it. Let me actually do it here first so it's easier to see. So you're gonna take it and you're gonna tuck it under like this. You're mostly trying to make the lattice part be the top. So now I'm gonna take this braid and you're gonna just move in the same direction. So I'm going counterclockwise. Does not at all matter which way you go, you just wanna go in the same direction. I'm gonna go counterclockwise.
SOS.
Wait, are we able to pause for a second? We're way behind you. All right.
No problem. I'll do another one in a second. Just if anybody like is raring to go, I'm gonna keep going, but I'll do another one in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're doing great. You're doing so great. So now you're gonna do you're gonna braid each end.
Oh,
Braid each
okay.
end. Okay.
But that looks beautiful. That looks super beautiful. Okay. So now I've tucked in this side, this side, this side. I'm doing my 4th side here. Okay. And now it's ready. It doesn't look as as I would normally want it to look, because because this middle strand is wide open. So you would normally see like a nice, beautiful pattern. It's hard to see the pattern because this is open, but I can fix that by putting you can either leave it, honestly, there's nothing wrong with leaving it. But if you want to fix it, you could just tuck a little more dough on top. I'm going to tuck, actually you can't see from that angle. There's this raisin poking out. I'm going to poke him back in. And now everybody's pretty covered up. Usually in the baking process, it will open up at some point, but it looks really nice. And that's your challah. Ta-da!
Yay! Rebecca, if if you're like me and you were not able to do the 6th braid, so like I'll show you. Like we're in this situation.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Or can the apples be poking out that much, or are they going to be burnt?
How big are they? Like, are they big slices or are they little? The littler they are, the more they're going to burn. The bigger they are, they're going to be fine. And they have a lot of moisture in them, so those should be fine. Okay, I'm going to put this hollow I just did to the side, and I'm going to go through the whole process again with just my regular unfilled strands if you just need to see it one more time. Okay? Just going to get out. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Rebecca, will we have an opportunity to replay this at any point if we want to do it again and like next time?
That's an Adina question.
We're recording this whole session, then we'll have it put up for you so you can walk through and stop as you wish.
Great,
Okay, perfect. And I also would recommend, I learned this braiding technique. If you're on Instagram, there's her handle is Challah at your girl. And she does these amazing braids, and she shows it, and I have to watch it a few times to get it, but that's where I got this from. So if you're, if you want to look at other braiding ideas, or you kind of want to see it a few times so you can figure it out, that's also a great thing to look at. Okay, I'll move this friend over. It's going to rise, and I'm going to do this again. All right. I'm going to have a drink of water first, honestly, and then I'm going to do it again.
Are these too long? How do we know how long they should be? Are they too long and thin?
I don't think I can see who's speaking.
Cindy.
Your pictures are not up, so I can't see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Hello.
Just can you click on your video?
There we go.
Let me see. That's great.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you make it maybe you want to make it a little shorter. Maybe like a foot is good. Because by the time you turn it all into the crown, that's going to be, you probably don't want it too long. I'm thinking of doing the braid where it doesn't really matter. Okay. I'm going to do the braid one more time. So I've got a dough. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut each of these into thirds. Okay, and then I'm going to roll them out. I would say that is, you know, really what's most important is keeping, you know, if it's too long or too short or too wide, you just want them to be consistent. You want them to be most like each other so that they bake evenly. And as I say that, they're turning into totally different shapes. So I've got these tiny guys and then these really long guys. So I'm going to go back and roll them and make sure that they're about the same. Picking up something on my counter. Okay. Whoops. Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Need one more. Okay, that is pretty good. See how those are pretty even? They're pretty much the same width. They're pretty much the same length. This friend, I'm gonna just try to repurpose. It's a little bit too wet, so I need a little flour. This is just technical because of the, because I tried to use it earlier with a filling and it just got too wet. Okay. This one's a little sad, but we're gonna give it life. Okay, so I've got my 3 strands. I'm gonna put this way. And I've got my 3 strands that are gonna go across. I'm gonna pull up my middle strand. Then I'm gonna pull it back over. I'm gonna put my 1 strand here right in the middle. So they're perpendicular. And I'm gonna pull this middle strand back over the bottom middle strand. Then on either side, you're gonna pull the 2 outer strands up and fold them.
Wait, slow down. I'm still back at step 1.
Okay, okay.
Pull up the middle strand you said first?
Yes. So you get 3 strands out, pull the middle strand up, and lay 1 across. Okay. And then, so once you've done that, you should have this. You should have under, over, under, over, under, over. Okay. So once you've done that, and you're at this point, you're going to pull your 2 outer strands up, and you're going to put this, your 1 strand next to your middle under strand, and pull these strands back over. And this is also a good moment when you can make sure you've got a nice tight weave here, that they're all next to each other and it's kind of tight, like you would want a pie lattice. Then you're going to pull up your other 2 outer strands, just making sure this piece is really good, ready to go. And then you're going to put this underneath and pull these strands over. Okay, so now I've got a really nice tight, weave here. And it looks, I don't know, like a tic-tac-toe board, like a picnic basket, like I've said, like a pie crust. So it should look like that. And then we're gonna braid, do the 3 braid of each end. So we're gonna braid this, 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 and this. And that's just a very simple braid, just like this. Over, under, over, over, under, and tuck it. So it should look like that. Okay, and then I'm going to do it again over here. Under, Well, I've never tried to say over under while braiding and it's totally throwing me off. Okay, and then tuck it underneath. I'm gonna braid this end. And this end. It is so hard. I find it so difficult to braid upside down. Okay. So once we're at this point, you've got your weave on the top, what'll be the top part of your challah, and now you've got these 4 strands sticking out. And we're gonna tuck the strands going all in one direction underneath to make it a crown. So I'm gonna do that step again. So it doesn't matter which way you go. Last time I went this way, this time I'm gonna go this way. You just go, you pull it up and you tuck it under. And you pull it up and you tuck it under. You pull it up and you tuck it under. And you pull it up and you tuck it under. And that's your challah that you can't see.
Wow, beautiful.
Great. And it gives it this nice round, kind of taller thing because it looks a little taller because you've tucked it underneath. So I hope seeing it twice was really helpful.
I had a few questions. Was this dough also defrosted or was this a fresh one?
It was defrosted. I had, do you remember when we started, I split it. I split it because I had enough for 2 challahs, so I split it into 2. So it was from the same batch.
And did you find that the dough was more wet, probably because it was frozen and defrosted, or no?
No, I think that when I made that challah, I was a little generous on the water.
Fair.
When I made it last Friday. So it wasn't about the freezing or any of that. It was about just originally how much water was in that challah.
Great. And then another question, 2 more. Which of the strands are filled? And then does it rise after braiding? If yes, for how long?
So I like to fill half of them, even if like how Alyssa did hers and, you know, the long strand. If I was doing that, I would just fill 1 or 2 of them because otherwise.
When you braided them, which ones across were filled and which ones were not?
It was
the middle one? Or?
It was just by happenstance. So one of them was the 2 outer and the other one was the middle. It could go either way. It's really up to you. That part's not a science. There was a question in there that I didn't get to answer, Jennifer.
Does it rise after braiding? If yes, for how long?
Thank you. Okay. So here are my braided ones. Okay, so this is the one we did first. It's already starting to rise a little bit. It's also got that top on there that I added to it. I would leave these to rise now with a dish towel over them for at least 2 hours. And those were the photos that I shared earlier, and I'll just share them again. So you can see what you should expect. I think it's really helpful to know like how much challah can I get out of this one recipe. So this was, oh, right, I already. So this was where we are now. Like I've just braided it and it's gonna sit and it's gonna rise. I'm gonna put a dish towel over it. And then I think that was the end after 2 hours. And I just put my hand there for reference. So it's
the one to the right of that one, of the one that you're pointing to, that looks different. Is that done differently?
It was just the first time I'd done it.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think it came out a little more.
It's really pretty. So I was just curious if that was a different braid or what.
No, that's this braid right here. That's the braid we did, but it just was my first time. So it got a little more polished, I think, tonight. So you start with this and you should get about this after it's risen for about 2 hours. And then at this point, you can put your wash on. You can do the maple with a soy milk if you'd like. You can do just your regular old egg. I usually do the egg. And then you can sprinkle anything on top with Rosh Hashanah. I like to sprinkle like some coarse sugar and then throw it in the oven. Any other questions?
We need to cover it to when it's going to be rising? Or
Yes, you should cover
yes?
it. Yeah. And a good trick, if you're feeling like your dough is a little bit drier than you'd like it to be, if you wet your towel, so you like put this in the water, right? And you wring out all the water, and then you put your wet towel over the challah to rise. That's going to give it some really nice moisture. If your challah is pretty moist like mine was, put a dry towel on it because you don't want it to be any drier, any wetter.
Better.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So if this wasn't a demo for me, like I actually did it and it's now like 8:45, wait 2 hours, but I'd like to go to sleep. What do you advise?
That is a great question. You can put it in the fridge and it'll pretty much just like pause it. It'll just hit pause. So
Fridge?
yeah, it'll still
What it,
a little bit.
and if it's in the oven,
It'll still wet it a little bit?
It'll still rise a little bit in the fridge. So you might even want to put like saran wrap over it on the baking sheet, like put, just so it doesn't become a monster, put saran wrap over it, tightly, like this on the baking sheet. And then that should keep everybody where you want it to be, so it doesn't like explode in your fridge.
Okay, and then in the morning, let it rise for another.
No, just in the morning, just pull it out, pop it in the oven.
Okay, and then glaze it, pop it in the oven.
Yes, glaze it, pop it in the oven.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Of course, it'll be really good for breakfast. Alyssa, you asked a question.
no, I just said if we already put it in the oven, what
That's
chizuk
fine.
would you offer?
It won't rise as much, but it'll be really delicious, and it'll be delicious. It just won't be as big.
You're so amazing, Rebecca. This has been awesome.
I'm so glad. Any other questions?
Can it rise too much if you leave it longer than 2 hours?
I think so. There have been some rare circumstances where, right, something like some emergency happened and I ran away from it for a few hours.
I think it loses its shape, doesn't it? I mean, it kind of mushes
It's more going to be in
together.
a taste because you've got yeast in it, so you're going to get a more sour taste in it. But putting it in the fridge will keep it from doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry, so when you take it out to the fridge tomorrow morning, you just put it straight in the oven. You don't let it rise anymore.
No, because it's going to continue. I forgot. It's going to continue to rise a bit in the fridge. So I think you want to just pop it in right away.
So after we finish braiding right now, we can just put it in the fridge,
Yeah.
let it rise overnight, and then put it in the oven tomorrow morning.
Yes, I'm 99% sure that's what's going to happen. So if I was wrong, let me know.
You don't have to let it come.
It can go in cold. You think it's okay to go into the oven?
Because it's going to continue to rise in the fridge. And if you pull it back out and put it on the counter to come up or warm up, I think I think the yeast is going to become sour. I think it's going to be too much rising.
Does anyone want to show off their challah?
Oh yeah, show off your challah. I want to see.
Sorry, can I ask you a question? Was the ideal time 30 minutes now or 2 hours? I got confused for this rising.
To let it rise? I let it rise like 2 more hours.
Oh, after you braid it.
After I braid it. But you could do 30 minutes. It's just going to become, it's going to be a little, the longer you can let it rise, it's going to become a little more airy and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So the less it rises, it's going to be a little bit denser and a little bit smaller. So it's really, it's not going to make or break it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much. This is
My
wonderful.
pleasure. Let's see some challahs. I want to see.
Mine's in the oven. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
I'll show you mine. Mine is also in the oven.
Okay, great.
There's
Oh,
mine.
that's beautiful. Those are beautiful, Adina.
I will show you mine, but I'm not.
Hey,
as
let's
sure
see,
if it's
Adina.
Oh, I just showed.
Adina just showed.
I
Oh, I
didn't
see
see.
Hetty's. Hetty's look nice also.
Oh, those are
Oh,
lovely.
Hetty's looks
Those are made
amazing.
by
So does
Gil-
Rachel's.
Ah,
Oh, very nice.
Not as talented.
those
as-
are great.
Thank you.
Oh, very nice, Liz.
Thank you.
That's
That's a lot of
beautiful.
fun.
Oh, look at that.
I love those little swirls. Ooh,
Wow.
Dr. Glass, very nice.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You guys are so good.
I know. I'm so impressed. I didn't get the whole word out.
Can people take pictures of their challah when they're done with their either themselves or with their families and send them to Adina?
Yeah, and I'm gonna also recommend a challah selfie with your challah.
And sorry, can I back up with another annoying question that I believe you answered like twice?
Of course.
So I know you assume that all of us do this all the time, but let's say we don't. So you think the best thing to do is to make the dough, freeze the dough, and then on the same day, braid it, let it rise, and cook it.
The same day, meaning taking it out of the freezer.
Yeah. Is that
So-
your advice? Like, what's the best way to, if you don't have a lot of time the day of, to?
So I would just, if you don't have a lot of, where you need time on the day of is so you can have it in the freezer, right? It's frozen. I give it like 6 hours to come out of the freezer before you want to be filling it and baking it. So
It's actually better to do what we just did, which is do most of it like the night before and then just bake it the day of, or it won't come out as well as keeping the dough frozen.
I'm sorry, I just don't totally understand the question.
Oh, like I'm just, imagining an Arab Chag that's challenging. Is it
Yeah.
better to actually do what we just did, which is, refrigerate it and then just bake it in the morning, then have it frozen the day of, or will it not keep as well?
I think it would keep a little bit better. And this is really on the spectrum of challahs. This is a small amount better. It's like not that big of a difference. I think it would keep a little bit better if you froze it.
Uh-huh.
Take it out, maybe take it out like, this year, like Arab Hogs like Friday. So like take it out Friday morning. You're doing it at like noon or early afternoon Friday before things get super crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I would do it that way. I think freezing would be a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to do this Thursday night
Mm-hmm.
and then bake it Thursday night or put it in the fridge and bake it first thing Friday morning, again, I think it's a small difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
And if you're going to put it in the fridge tonight, see how it goes. And let me know because I haven't done it in a long time.
Okay.
You
thanks.
also completely bake the challah and then just warm it up on Friday.
She's not a fan.
I'm not a fan of
I
that.
feel like Adina's gonna do that. I can sense that.
Yeah. You're going to do it, Adina?
I have a lot of noise here, so I didn't hear what.
I said I bet you're gonna freeze your challah and then defrost it.
Yeah, I get a little busy before Rosh Hashanah, so I usually do my challah baking way ahead of time.
You, Adina, you get busy.
Just a bit.
That's a great idea. I mean, if that's I would prefer to have it fresh, but of course, if you have circumstances that makes that easier for you, then that's what you should do.
I found it's not quite as good, but it's at like 85-90% if you warm it before you serve it.
That makes sense. I bet that does make a big difference.
And
That's a really good point.
you don't tell them that it came from frozen, like my family can't tell.
Okay, so if you're gonna do it that way, just warm it and you're good to go.
This is some real life wisdom we're receiving.
I know.
I don't have the self-control. I'm just gonna eat it right away.
Please do. All right, unless there's any other questions, I think this was a very, very successful challah bake, and I really, really appreciate everyone who came and baked with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much. And
Jen
Jen put her email and phone number in there to send pictures.
Perfect.
Thank you guys. This was amazing. And just a reminder that you can register now for High Holy Day seats if you would like to join us in person. The email went out tonight. Very exciting. And we will have our next LO program on Tuesday night next week, where we will have our book club with Deb Brandt-Seraph. You can join us if you've read the book To Heal a Fractured World by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. You can join us if you have not read the book, or if you read like 3 pages of the book. You can join us no matter what your situation is. So have a wonderful night, and thank you again to Rebecca, to Jen, and to Adina.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Bye,
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.